Moon Knight Marc Spector first debuted in Marvel's panels in August of 1975 in Werewolf by Night issue 32. Often described as what would happen if Batman were to suffer multiple personality disorder, Moon Knight makes for one of the publisher's most complex and fascinating individuals, who is yet to bust out into the mainstream success that some of their other heroes have had, particularly ones who've appeared in the MCU. So with a reputation like that, some of you less familiar with the character might be wondering, well, what exactly can Moon Knight do? Well, today on Top 10 Nerd, we are counting down the top 10 superpowers you never knew Moon Knight had. So, you're about to find out. Let's get to it. In at number 10, moon-based powers. Moon Knight, similar to Batman, is a rich dude with a whole lot of training and willpower. But unlike the Cape Crusader, when Moon Knight first hit the scene, he actually had superpowers. The character has been susceptible to a lot of changes over the years thanks to new creative teams taking on his solo title, which explains these changes. For example, in 1985, in a 6-part miniseries, Moon Knight became known as the Fist of Khonshu, Khonshu being the ancient Egyptian god of the moon and vengeance. This increased his strength, speed, and endurance, but was based on the lunar cycle, meaning that the fuller the moon was, the stronger Moon Knight became, capable of lifting several hundred pounds. This is where things got a little messy though. He was last seen using these lunar powers while on the West Coast Avengers team, a team that he left in 1989. But it wasn't until 2007 in the Midnight Sun story arc that he was confirmed to no longer have those powers. Apparently they were taken away from him as a punishment for his disobedience. Up next, number 9, he is resistant to psychic attacks. Marc Spector has proven to have immunity to psychic attacks over the years. Now this is largely owed to his multiple personalities, and he's been known in the past to even receive prophetic visions. In addition to that, in Moon Knight issue 12, Moon Knight finds himself going up against the Profile, who is an unethical profiler for hire who is believed to have mutant abilities that allow him to analyze and predict the actions of anyone he observes. Scary, right? But that did not bother Moon Knight. Profiler claimed that his abilities had no effect on Moon Knight, with him being physically painful for the antagonist to look at. His abilities don't work on those with supernatural powers, yet Moon Knight at the time did not have powers. Profiler believes that the only explanation for this is that Khonshu is actually real, or that Marc was so insane that his belief in the Egyptian god is tantamount to magic and therefore disrupts Profiler's abilities. Moving on to number 8 is mercenary skills. Before becoming a superhero, Marc Spector was a mercenary for hire employed by the CIA, and prior to that he was a heavyweight boxer before becoming a US Marine. After his time in the military, he jumped over to mercenary work, with the CIA hiring him as a freelancer of sorts. But after a botched mission in Egypt, he ended up being beaten to near death by a peer named Raoul Bushman, who would later be a major villain for him. He was left to die in the sub-zero temperatures of the Egyptian desert at night. He is then found by Egyptians who worship the ancient gods, brought to Khonshu's temple, and his heart stops altogether. He then sees a vision of the god who offers him a second chance if he becomes the god's avatar on Earth. Spector agrees, wakes up, and then goes after Bushman and becomes Moon Knight. Now because of his previous training, he also has Olympic level athlete skills and is an expert in fighting styles likes of karate, ninjutsu, judo, muay thai, boxing, kung fu, and more. He also knows how to pilot the hell out of an aircraft too. Up next at 7, Werewolf Hunter. In Moon Knight's very first comic book appearance, he was brought in as a werewolf hunter and a supernatural expert of sorts. And he was actually a villain, attempting to capture Werewolf by Night Jack Russell in a 2-part story for the Committee, which is an LA-based secret criminal cabal of businessmen who would later become an opponent of Moon Knight's. Now that's because Spector learns that the Committee is trying to use him as a weapon, so he ends up helping Werewolf escape and fights alongside him. Weirdly enough, a handful of issues later, in Werewolf at Night issue 37, Moon Knight returned, but as a demonic apparition that fought against Werewolf, so that's fun. And at 6, visibility. Okay, so this really isn't a power, but it is a technique that Spector employs that helps him be more intimidating and to throw his opponents off. Now unlike the DC vigilante he is constantly compared to, Marc actually wears a full white costume so that he can be seen. He wants to be seen. This was something that was addressed on Warren Ellis's 2014 run on the character's solo title. Moon Knight chooses to wear white because he doesn't have any interest in using stealth techniques. Like I said, he wants to be seen. It's his brand of fear. In at number 5, he has 10 different personalities. Marc Spector has dissociative identity disorder. It's one of his most defining traits in the comics. Now over the years though, some of the creative teams who have worked on Moon Knight have attempted to retcon his mental illness as being part of Khonshu's personality. Regardless, we've seen at least 10 unique personalities emerge from Spector in the comics, which include the wealthy businessman Stephen Grant, a cab driver named Jake Lockley who has an uncanny ability of gaining street intel on criminals and their activities, and even a personality known as Mr. Knight, an official detective for the NYPD while he operated as the vigilante Moon Knight at night. Even more interestingly, during the 2011 Moon Knight series, Marc manifests personalities for that iteration of the Avengers at the time. One for Wolverine, Captain America, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Echo, all of which gave him advice, and he ends up using variations of their signature weapons and moves. So how is this a power? Well, it's more so a shifting of perspectives that have aided Spector in one way or another over the years, with each of these personalities' unique skill sets. It's also been a coping mechanism. Stephen Grant was largely created in order to help Marc subconsciously deal with his very violent past. Moving on to number 4, his tech. Moon Knight has a whole lot of expensive and effective gear. He uses some impressive tech that rivals what DC's Batman has been known to bust out. He's also rich, which helps. He's got an advanced truncheon that can split into 2 separate combat clubs, and can also be tethered together like nunchucks. And he has an adamantium grappling hook, crescent darts that are kind of like this hero's version of batarangs, and of course his coolest piece of tech by far, the Mooncopter. This bad boy is a sophisticated hovering aircraft that has vertical takeoff and landing abilities, 20mm cannons, stealth and combat equipment, and much more. Plus he's got a remote-controlled crescent-shaped glider and a remote-controlled limousine. He's owned suits made out of adamantium, and during the Dark Reign story event, he gets the Tinkerer to upgrade his gear, giving him a suit of armor that is made out of carbonandium. It also has joint-locking functions, which allows him to sport a whole lot of extra weight than what's humanly possible, especially now that he doesn't have superhuman strength. Speaking of tech, that brings us to our next number. In at 3, the Shadow Cabinet. Now the Shadow Cabinet is something that Marc Spector assembled as a network of informants and agents whose advice he often requires. It's essentially a sophisticated computer network. Now for the most part, many of those agents were unaware of who they were actually speaking to, having been recruited anonymously with promise of financial payment, or with the use of blackmail, deception, trading favors, or just flat out due to the kindness of their hearts. Now, this cabinet is a piece of tech that uses hollow projection rings with one-way communicators that lets Marc see those that he is speaking to, but only lets them hear his voice on the other end. Marc would first use it in Marc Spector Moon Knight issue 38 in 1992 when he attempted to track the movements of his serial killer brother, Randall Spector. In at 2, his durability. Spector has an almost superhuman tolerance for pain. He uses a very specific fighting style, which consists of him enduring any blows that he takes in battle. In the 2006 run on Moon Knight, we saw the title character go up against villain Taskmaster, who has the ability to mimic the fighting style of any individual. Except, he will not mimic Moon Knight's. That's because Marc never blocks incoming attacks. As he puts it, it's never about speed or slick moves or reflexes that make you the best fighter ever. It's all about what you can take. Now because of this, he's got a crazy high pain tolerance, making him almost superhuman in durability. Taskmaster shot him in the shoulder with a crossbow and it barely affected Marc. But when you consider another skill of his that's in at our next number, taking this many hits is no biggie. That brings us to our number 1 spot, resurrection. Moon Knight has died and then been resurrected on several occasions, including in his origin story. As we mentioned, his heart stopped, and that's when he encountered Khonshu for the first time after he was essentially killed by Raoul Bushman. Then in Marc Spector Moon Knight issue 28, he was literally stabbed in the back, and his soul drifted out of his body. Khonshu revived him. And it kept happening thanks to that Egyptian moon god. Marc in the same series would receive another fatal injury, this time thanks to an explosion caused by Marc quarantining himself with a computer virus. That was rather deadly. So in other words, he can handle being dealt fatal blows since, he's got a free get out of death card in the form of Khonshu saving his butt all the time. Alright, there we have it friends. Do you want to know more about Moon Knight? Should we feature more lists about the character on our channel? Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know. And if you guys dug this video, you know what to do. Spread that love, hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe to Top 10 Nerd for more lists just like this one. In the meantime, thanks for watching friends. I'll catch you all in the next video.